Wow, are you in for a treat today? We have Michael McAfee here from PolicyLink, and we're going to have a conversation about the business value of racial equity. And it's going to be a lot of fun. But before we go there, I want to talk a little bit about the word equity. This is a room full of business people. We do not mean the kind of equity that you might be living and breathing every day. We do not mean equity as in ownership in a business. We do not mean equity as in capital, at least not financial capital at the moment. And I know there's a lot of Spanish speakers in the room. And I know as an English speaker, the idea of equality and equity, I sometimes even get them confused. And so we're talking about equidad, not igualdad. Did I get that right, Laura? Yes, thank you. And so we want you to feel included too. And so if you have any questions about the nuance of this, because it is nuanced. And so, Michael, we're so thrilled you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
The whole conversation, the thread has been purpose. Do you want to tell us a little bit about PolicyLink and the purpose of PolicyLink?
Sure. Good afternoon. PolicyLink is a research and action organization based in Oakland, California. And our purpose is to advance equity, as we define as just and fair inclusion, into a society in which everyone can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential. What that really means is that we are in business to make sure that we are enacting a set of policies, designing a nation that actually works for the most vulnerable in the nation. The 100 million in America that live at 200% of poverty, that's 1 in 3 Americans. And so that is our job. We do that through communications and narrative work. We do that through really a management consulting practice. We do that by making sure that there is a strong movement of social justice leaders who are engaged in creating an equitable world. And we ultimately do this through systems changes and policy wins throughout the nation. We're headquartered in Oakland, California, 70-person shop with offices in New York and DC.
And so yesterday, Nicole Merchant was here, and she talked a lot about people have this sense of onlyness. Like, I might be the only one here with my background, or I might be the only one here who has this disability. I might be the only one here that's this race or this sexual identity. I wonder, one of the things that she said was that when that onlyness happens, that people don't perform well. And so we have folks here trying to figure out, like, how do we make people feel included? What do we do in an organization so that that onlyness isn't driving people's behavior? And what's the business value of inviting them in?
So I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to ask you just to hang with me a little bit because I'm just going to talk to you. And so when I talk to you, you may have a reaction to what I'm saying, but I really would ask that you think about the reaction and still just listen, because I'm not trying to be politic, I'm just talking with you. And I'm also not proselytizing. We all have to find answers ourselves. So I'm gonna answer by being on my own journey and try to make sure that you understand that I'm coming from a deeply humble place, even though my voice may sound absolute. I'm not absolute. On the journey as all of us. I think inclusion starts with us being clear about what we center. What do we center? And in some places I say, okay, whiteness is often centered. And when whiteness is centered, what I have learned in America, that means I have to not bring my full self. Because if I bring my full self, people will say, I don't want to talk about race, or I don't want to talk about your experience, or there are structures that don't include me. So when whiteness is centered, oftentimes folks have learned in America, you don't bring your full self because the risking to be that vulnerable often comes with a sanction. And I'll give you a good example. In my 20s, when I was learning how to get out of poverty and start my first job at a foundation, they actually sent me to anger management because I had the audacity to actually have passion around the intellectual ideas that we were discussing about community. Their interpretation of my passion was that I was angry. And so they felt a need to fix me. So they sent me to go talk to a woman named Dr. Dottie Fanninsteel for a year. And that was my first exposure with, outside of growing up and what I learned in my own family about how to protect yourself, was that, in fact, if I wanted to be in this world, I had to figure out some other ways of navigating it because my height, a lot of things about me, even before you talk to me, sends a very clear signal that I'm not centered in that space. Now, the same also applies for me now running an organization. I'm still asking the question, what is centered at PolicyLink? It looks like the United Nations, and that doesn't mean we have it right. I still have to be open to, who do I not see? Do I not see transgender folks? Do I not see indigenous peoples? Do I not see returning citizens? Do I not see talent who doesn't have a degree, but is just brilliant? So if I want to be inclusive, I think it starts with me and my person as a leader being very clear about what am I centering? And then actually having the commitment, the purpose, to actually want to create something different. And this is why I often bristle at the business case. Because I think sometimes in life, there's some stuff you just need to stop trying to create a case for. And you should just do that. I really do mean that, folks. Because you see with the biggest recent higher education scandal in America, rich folks don't create a business case for their kids. They do whatever it takes to give their kid a fighting chance. You're going to spend $5 million for one kid to get to college. Think about how many times you paid for that over and over. But it didn't matter because you wanted to set your kid up for life. But when it comes to those people, we need a business case. Yeah. And here's why I say that. I don't think women should wait till I get the business case to pay them equally. Think about that for a moment. That might take me 20 years and I might not ever get it. Making the case would assume that I even wanted to be on an intellectual journey to even understand and be in relationship with you. That's the first faulty assumption, that if I just structure the case, that the leader actually gives a damn. And in too many cases, the case has already been made 1,000 times over and we're not heeding the call. Look at global warming right now. Let's just take it away from equity for a moment, right? Mm-hmm. The case has been made and we still want to debate that. And so for me, I think we're at a point in our nation where the question is, what do you want to center and what does the leader want to care about and what is the purpose that the leader is trying to create? Because the reality is our society is becoming too toxic for everyone. So for all those folks who thought it was just about business, go ask folks at Facebook right now who are crying because they can't afford to live in the Bay. The irony, right? All those rugged individualists, those rugged capitalists now are complaining because they have to make a trade-off. We neglected our public school systems, we neglected our housing, and now you have to decide if you have a family. Can I afford to live in San Francisco, this beautiful, bustling downtown, or do I have to move out to the suburbs now because I can't use the public education system for my kids? And I certainly can't pay that mortgage or that rent and pay for private education. And so there is a toxic effect that's happening because it seems like the only way we can see humanity in each other is if there is a business case made for it. I think there's something fundamentally flawed with that, and I'm all for making money. I didn't take a vow of poverty in my own position. So I'm not saying don't make money. But what I am saying is let's question some of these frames.
No, absolutely. But let's talk about that humanity piece because, you know, like a lot of the people in the room, I worked in business, and sometimes there's a culture of fear and scarcity.
Yes.
And when I was in a culture of fear and scarcity, like my love muscle got weak, right? That ability to do what you're talking about sometimes is harder. And so what are some of the ways that you have found at your organization and seeing other organizations have more humanity, grow that love muscle, set the fear down, invite in the onlyness?
I think it starts when leaders think about creating the conditions. And so I often find when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion that it is the most unaccountable endeavor that we ever undertake. I don't know anywhere in your businesses or in mine where someone could be a senior leader and tell me they can't find one black person. They can't think of one new business idea and keep their job. That would not be tolerated in your main business functions. You would not accept that. I can't find one Asian board member. You would fire that person. But when it comes to these type of conversations, we will allow people to fall to a behavior that we never tolerate, a behavior of learned helplessness. I don't have the answer. I don't know. I'm afraid. Think about how you respond to your executives and your staff when those same emotions come up in other areas. You work to overcome them. You do not authorize that to become the dominant logic in your organization, where I can be afraid and not perform. I cannot understand and not choose to learn. I cannot be intellectually curious. Those behaviors would not be tolerated. So when I say the conditions are about saying, you know, I come from Kansas City, Missouri. I live in the Bay now. I don't get all the 100 different identities that people associate with themselves. But it doesn't mean I'm not curious. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that I have to agree with them all to still create space. But what it does mean is I have to have a heart that is actually committed to trying to be in relationship with folks. It means that I have to have a heart that is committed to being to more than just oppressing folks. And the things that we're talking about may sound soft, but they're the reasons why we're having so many conflicts in so many other areas, right? And so for me, I think when leaders show up, all of our muscles are weak, quite frankly. So that's why I said I'm not lecturing to you, because I'm on this same journey of trying to figure out how to love with greater depth, to be in relationship, even when it hurts. Because I think if we're going to have a strong democracy, I think the challenge for me right now is to be in relationship even when it hurts. And I'll give you a really good example. I sit on a couple of boards where the conversation has shifted to civil society given the politics of what we're in. And I was having lunch with one of the executives recently, and I was like, you know, I find it really fascinating that we want to talk about civil society because we haven't even been able to talk about race. And you're getting ready to go to an organization that is known for oppression in their tactics. And they've caused great harm in this nation, a corporate institutional infrastructure. And I said, what I find fascinating about this, especially because I know you as a really good person with a deep Jesuit background, that you can look, no. That you can look past me, that you've been knowing for years, and run straight to that, and never want to even acknowledge, one, the disrespect, two, the hurt, and how invisible that makes me. And here's what I was saying to the person. You're actually asking me to suspend something. You're actually saying to me, Michael, I know I'm still punching the teeth out of your mother, but be in relationship with me. Let's have a national conversation about what's going on. And I said, you know, if I was hurting your mom right now, there is no way in hell you would even want to sit down with me. But this is what it looks like when we don't question what we center. I'm not centered in that conversation, so you can run to something else that is white and safer for you to have a high-level civil society conversation around and actually miss that 100 million that I'm telling you that is oppressed, which 26% is white. And the person started crying because they had never thought about it. So this is where their love muscle was weak. But it also meant that I needed to be able to communicate in a way where it was not like we're trying to fight, but we're trying to get in relationship. Yeah. Because what I was trying to say to them is, for many people of color and many poor people, that's what we've been doing for our lives. And this is not that moment where I have to sit here and allow you to run roughshod over my community, and then you want to talk to me about some esoteric concept. It's not the moment that we're in. That's not the moment that women are in around equal pay and how they're treated in the workplace or in the community with respect. And I think for all of us, we've got to not be afraid by these moments, because it's easy to feel like there's not a place for us. Like as women rise in power, I can't tell you how many men I know who feel like, man, where's the place for men to be men? They're actually missing the point. No one's taking anything away from you. The question is, what have you been taken away in the way you've authorized space to be held, right? And that's what we're all struggling with. So part of this is why I'm so glad we're having this conversation, is that I think we have to go a lot deeper in the way we relate to each other and stop stop with the kid gloves.
So take it up a level.
Take it up a notch. We can be respectful and disruptive of mental models that are not serving us well.
Yeah.
This is what business asks of itself every day, to innovate, to disrupt ways of thinking that are getting in the way of finding what's next.
Yeah. So I'm going to take it from a global perspective. And I want to say this is a global perspective. Michael's speaking a lot to the U.S. We know in the U.S. that somewhere around 2044, the majority of people in the U.S. will be people of color. It's projected around 2050 to be the same in Europe. Australia is looking at the same. So our employees, our consumers, our neighbors, this isn't this isn't a nice to do. This is our reality. And this is our reality in this room, right? So this morning, Greg opened and said, you know, here in the U.S., we're facing a reckoning and an awakening around racism. And, you know, I would say that some of us are awakening. Some people have been facing with that reckoning since the day they've been born. And so for those of us who are waking up and looking around this room, I mean, you know a lot of black leaders who should be in this room who aren't. I know a lot of black leaders who should be in this room who aren't. And so if we look at this community of the Shared Value Initiative, what could we be doing so that we're more inclusive, that we're more open, that we look like that beloved community that you're talking about? And go for it.
No, I'm thinking, because I don't know, so I'm trying not to project my bias onto this group.
You walked in, you know what you feel.
Yeah, but I also know the intention of the leaders, and so this is, right, and so this is where there's a disconnect for me.
Intention and impact are just so different.
Intention and impact are very different, but what I would say is this: in most cases, conversations around corporate social responsibility, shared value now, the evolution of that, have really not included us. They've not been about us. And I would also say, even if we got into the room, people really didn't want to hear about our issues. So it's kind of like, why come, right? Because to me, shared value gets us to, I think it's a powerful concept, but it's not about charity work. It's not just about profit making. It is about, can we actually see systems of oppression in our community at the same time that we're making money? And a lot of people still don't want to have that conversation. So it's like, why come? Why come if you're going to be the skunk in the garden party for the 1,000th time, right? Yeah. You don't want to be there. And so I don't know what's happening in this space. What I often find, even in my own space, sometimes where I would say we don't often include indigenous people as much as we should, or we don't include the deep grassroots of grassroots advocates as we should. Right. What it signals is I'm actually not in relationship, individually or my institution, as much as I would like to think. And it means that I've got to do what shared value often asks us to do in the value chain, which is to get out of our comfort zone and find other, if you will, distribution channels for finding what you need. Right. And I think because our love muscle is so weak, we don't really actually have the strength of networks that we think we have. They pretty much look like us, talk like us, act like us. And that's where we're at. So I often find that that's what's deficient when I think about our own networks in my experience. It's because, one, we've assumed that we were in relationship. We've assumed that if we structured the right agenda, folks would come. But the relationship building and the signaling to say to folks that, you know, if you come to this, a different possibility is going to happen based on your previous experience that I'm holding, has not happened. That work hasn't happened. And so I'm hypothesizing right now that in many cases, corporate social responsibility and shared value is still centered around profit making versus the value proposition.
Yeah. And we know that shareholder value has created atrocities to our earth. I mean, we use shareholder value to destroy our earth. We used it to justify slavery. Today, even still. And so if we need to be brave, one of the things that I hear you saying is we need to be in relationship. And some of us aren't in a relationship. So what are some ways that we can authentically and respectfully be in proximity to the people and the communities for whom we're trying to have shared value impact on, that we're trying to have positive impact, and then bring those people into true relationship? Sure. What are some of the ways?
I think when you don't make this work as an add-on and as an aside, and that it is integral to what you do, you find the answers. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like me actually working with indigenous folks is not a novelty. It's not something that I'm fetishizing. I actually want them to share power with me. I actually want to help solve some of their structural challenges. So it's easier because it's not like make work. I'm not trying to have this Indigenous Peoples initiative at PolicyLink, and I'm going to go and find now my director of Indigenous Peoples. Don't need that. What I need to is imbue in my entire staff that there's a priority, and it needs to be a part of all of our work.
Yeah.
So to me, that's what's missing in so much of what we're doing. It's not fundamentally at its core yet. And it's not a critique, and this is why I'm not critiquing. We are making advances all around the globe, and we got so much more to do. This conversation is really now, how do we accelerate and build on all the good work that you all have done? So if you were to say, what the hell is he talking about? I'm trying to have a conversation around accelerating and building on your legacy, the good work that you've already done.
Right, we talked about this.
Yeah,
these are the good actors in the room.
Yeah, this is the opportunity for us to think about now, how do we go back and catalyze the next evolution of the work? And I think oftentimes we don't have the luxury to think about that because we're so busy in the grind. But I think that is the work for our generation now, to get us unstuck as a nation, as sectors who can't seem to find our way forward, which is to now leap over the field 5 to 10 years, have a different language, a different conversation, be in a different relationship, and watch what happens. I can tell you, over the last 5 years, I've been blown away by what I've seen from white America in a positive way. I'm seeing people struggle with their own impacts in the world, their own legacies, and I know that from the conversations that I'm having with them. I know that from watching how they've transformed their organizations. 10 years ago, I wasn't seeing that.
Yeah.
I was seeing it more, okay, let's hire a diversity, equity, inclusion person.
Yeah.
That's happening right now, and where that's happening, it's usually failing.
Right.
Where I'm seeing folks struggle with who they are and what it means and their purpose,
Yeah.
I'm seeing transformation happen in our communities, in our organizations. So I'm saying, even though we're in a heavy time in America, even though across the globe we're in a heavy time in many places, with our politics, with the way we see each other, or the way we don't see each other, because I travel so much, I'm hopeful because I see people struggling with these issues at every level.
It's like what we heard yesterday is that we want change, but in order for change, we have to change.
Yeah, and that's why I'm not
calling on that.
And that's why I'm not going to the value proposition first, because that leads me to be unaccountable, and it won't stick, right?
Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Yeah, any? You can take a big breath. It's a lot. Yeah, please be first. Do we have a mic?
I'll repeat the question.
Yeah, we have a mic, Michael. Michael. A mic that doesn't work, but we have a mic.
Hello? Oh, there we go. Hi. First of all, thank you so much for your comments. I just wanted to snap so many times for what you were saying. A couple of things I've kind of interpreted I want your thoughts on, and I have a question, is this morning actually with some colleagues on my table, I was talking about the one thing about this shared value conversation that still kind of gets me, and I'm in a corporate philanthropy role, is that the people that are starting these new businesses and endeavors are kind of not closest to the pain. And so for me, I feel like we're leaving out the people that should be closest to the power, which is the folks that are seeing these issues in their communities, have ideas, have social ventures that they don't even know is a social venture. And so I feel like we're kind of, in a sense, disenfranchising them from the very idea of shared value. And that's what I struggle with, where they see us as philanthropy. Well, you guys can go handle that demographic, while we as a business kind of look like we're doing shared value, which we are, but to a different swath of society. And so hearing you speak to kind of the way you're kind of interpreting equity is something that we're still, frankly, struggling with across our company. And the mantle I carry as a woman of color in philanthropy is exhausting sometimes. And so I feel like the work that you're doing through PolicyLink that does lend validation to the argument I've been making for years before getting to where I am now is super helpful. And so with that in mind, you mentioned some things that are positive, you've seen progression on. From a business standpoint, what gives you the most hope that we're kind of getting right, that maybe we can lean into when we go in to have these conversations?
What I'm most hopeful about is, one, a lot of strategies that I see. I see folks paying workers more. I see folks joining in advocacy efforts to fight back tenant protections, to fund new housing collaboratives and things like that. I see folks beginning to get at some of the structural stuff. I see people pushing back on some oppressive institutions when they often would have stayed on the sidelines. But I'm still concerned because I think in many ways, I would just say, for example, I think a lot of the diversity, equity, inclusion stuff, you could just save your money and pack that stuff up and put people in another function. I think it's useless. I think it's useless because the folks really have no way to really influence the organization. It's a joke. And if you all ever seen the movie Get Out, I can't tell you how many times I go into a place and as soon as we get along, the person's like, help me. They're like, help me because this is not connected to the board. The C-suite leaders are off doing what they do, and yet we think change is going to happen. And they basically have come show and tell people. Let's have a lunch celebrating Mexicans this month. Let's have a food truck festival. Yeah. The hell with all of that. Let's talk about paying people equitable wages. Let's talk about what's happening in our system with our lobbying arms that are stripping people's ability to participate in democracy in this country. Those are the things that are really the diversity, equity, inclusion challenges of our time. And we're fiddling around with show and tell. You could save that money. And so that's what I'm seeing is the exciting things that people are questioning that. I'm also seeing where people are actually putting metrics to this stuff. It's really positive. I'm also seeing leaders making every functional division in that organization come up with these metrics. And there I'm seeing change. So I've got tons of stuff I can share with you on that.
And so Michael will be here for a bit more. He is also a red-eye warrior who came in, left himself up, got dressed up for us, but he'll be here for a little bit more, and I know that there's a lot of people who want to talk with him. But I want to close with a quote. There's an author who I love who passed away this week. And her name's Rachel Held Evans, for those of you who know. And I'm going to read a quote. And the word church isn't here, but we could replace church with synagogue, mosque, conference, convening, classroom, meeting. Imagine if every church became a place where everyone is safe, but no one is comfortable. Imagine if every church became a place where we told one another the truth. We might just create a sanctuary. And so, Michael, thank you for bringing truth into the room. And thank you for trying to create a sanctuary where we can be a little uncomfortable and get this important work of the world done.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.